There are two basic types of modeling in Maya. Now, we've talked about polygonal surfaces, but we also have what are called NURBS surfaces. Now, a NURBS surface is basically a non-uniform rational B-spline surface. And to put it simply, it's basically a surface made up of curves. So curves themselves or curved patches. So if we take a look at some of these NURBS surfaces here, you can see that instead of straight lines attaching the detail in a NURBS surface is curved. So we have curved lines and curved patches. Now, a NURBS surface has different components than a polygonal surface. A polygonal surface would have vertices, edges, and faces. But if we right-click above a NURBS surface, you'll see that we have a bunch of different ones. And probably the most important one is the control vertex. Now, that is very similar to the vertex in polygonal modeling, but typically the control vertices are off of the surface itself. They're either on the outside or the inside. So if I were to select, say, some of these control vertices, you can see that they're not stuck to the surface. But if we move them, you can see how we can gently deform and shape the surface. So you can see this is a lot more organic and flexible than polygonal modeling. So we have control vertices, but we also have hulls. Now, if we take a look at this hull, you'll see that it almost looks like a polygonal surface. And so here we have the straight lines in a polygonal surface that we don't have in a NURBS-based surface. And all those straight lines do is connect the control vertices. So again, the control vertices are basically just the points on that surface. So a hull is really just a way to visualize kind of like the cage around what would normally be a subdivision surface. Now I'm going to go back into object mode here, and let's go ahead and select this whole surface. Now if we look at this surface closely, you'll see that one of these lines is a little bit thicker than the rest. And the reason for that is that a NURBS surface is always a rectangular patch. Now, the best way to conceptualize it is to think of a NURBS patch as just a piece of wrapping paper that is infinitely flexible. And so we can wrap all sorts of objects with a square piece of paper, and that's basically what a NURBS patch is. So probably the easiest way to take a look at that is to highlight this cylinder. Now, the cylinder is very similar to the sphere in that it's created from a single NURBS patch. If I right-click above it, you can see I have control vertices, which I can manipulate just in the same way. And if we go back in object mode, you'll see that, again, if I select this, we have one line here that's a little bit bigger than the others. And that's because that's a seam. That's where the rectangular patch connects. So if I go into the creation parameters of this by clicking on the attribute editor and going into Make NURBS Cylinder, you'll see that we have a start and an end sweep. So I'm going to go ahead and unsweep that. So I'm going to actually increase my start sweep here so that we can see it. So as you can see, this is really just essentially a piece of paper that's been wrapped around into the shape of a cylinder. And that patch is really the basis of all NURBS modeling. You have these square patches, and then you shape them into whatever you want. So unlike polygonal modeling, where you can have extrudes and all sorts of branches, NURBS modeling is based on these square patches that are connected together. Now, there's all sorts of fancy tricks for doing that, but that's the basis of it. Now, if we take a look at the sphere, again, we have a similar situation. We have a start sweep and an end sweep, and I can open this up just to see how this is constructed. So if you think about this cylinder, if we took that cylinder and we crunched up the top and the bottom, we would get something that looks very similar to that sphere. So the sphere is basically just a square patch where the top and bottom have been collapsed to a single point. So those are some of the basics of NURBS components, as well as how NURBS surfaces are constructed. So let's go ahead and use this information to dive even deeper into NURBS modeling.